Welcome back. So last week we established a basic case for ethnography in virtual worlds. That the social relations that happen there are real, that participant observation in a game environment is a legitimate and productive form of anthropological fieldwork, and that the field site extends beyond the game itself into the distributed network of practices, systems, and communities that make the game what it is. This week I want to press on a question that follows directly from that, and I think gets underestimated when people design this kind of research. What exactly are you studying? The naive answer is the game, but that answer, it turns out, is not quite right. Or rather, it's right only if you already know what the game means. And that is precisely the thing that your fieldwork is supposed to help you figure out. The three readings for this week: Taylor's 2009 paper on the assemblage of play, Berryman and Aberdeen's chapter on ethnography in virtual worlds from the new Practicing Digital Ethnography volume, and Goutman's EVE Online case study from the same book approach this question from three different angles. Together they give you the methodological equipment you'll need to start writing about your fieldwork in a way that is analytically serious. Let's begin with the game on the shelf. T.L. Taylor opens their 2009 paper with a question about how to write the history of game studies. But the more important move comes quickly after, when they ask, what is a computer game, when you try to analyse it carefully? The obvious answer is the product that comes off the shelf, or gets downloaded from a server, turns out to be inadequate. The package is, in some sense, the least interesting version of the game. What people play is not the package. It's the package as instantiated in a specific community of practice, at a specific historical moment, in a specific configuration of hardware and software and bodies and relationships. Two players buying the same game at the same time may be playing in any meaningful sense entirely different things. Taylor's framework for handling this is the concept of assemblage. The game, understood as a lived object, not as a packaged product, is constituted by the interrelations between a whole range of actors: the software and its underlying code, the bodies sitting at the keyboards, the online space of the game, the social worlds of the players, the emergent practices of communities, the institutional structures of the company that made it, the legal frameworks that govern it, the broader cultural context that gives it meaning. None of these alone produces a game. All of them together, in their interrelations, in their mutual shaping and co-configuration, produce what the game actually is for its players. The concept of assemblage comes with a methodological implication. You cannot study the game by looking only at one of these elements. The rules don't explain the experience. The experience doesn't explain the community. The community doesn't explain the corporate structure. What you need is a methodology that can move between these levels and trace the interrelations, the flows between system and player, between emergent practice and developer revision, between local guild culture and server-wide norms, between design intentions encoded in the software and the uses players actually make of it. Taylor's example is powerful precisely because it's small and concrete. CTRaidAssist, a player-made modification for World of Warcraft. CTRaidAssist is an add-on, an external software installed alongside the game, that integrates with the game's own code to provide raiders with additional information and functionality. Most relevantly, when the Baron Geddon encounter transforms a player into a living bomb, CTRA does not merely show the affected player a text message in their own chat window. It broadcasts a prominent warning in the centre of every participating player's screen. It shouts textually to the player directly, "You are the bomb," it shouts to everyone else, "Move away from them." Taylor's point is that CTRA has, in this moment, become something like a 41st member of the raid. It's not a passive tool. It's an active agent. It takes information that previously required a human to translate and broadcast, and does that translation and broadcasting itself. If the raid leader would normally call out who has been turned into the bomb, CTRA does it faster, more reliably, and in a way that cannot be missed. The raid leader types nothing. The mod speaks for them. The voice in the chat channel is attributed to a human player, but the human typed nothing. The machine did the work. This is what Taylor, drawing on Latour's actor network theory, calls a distribution of competencies between humans and non-humans. The agency of the raid is not located in the humans alone. It's distributed across the whole assemblage of players, mods, voice servers, game code and hardware. When a mod fails to fire at the right moment, uses an outdated version that doesn't communicate with newer versions, human players have to step in to take over functions that the mod normally performs. The roles are not fixed, they are distributed, delegated, and renegotiated in real time. And here is Taylor's final move, which is crucial for your fieldwork. The researcher is inside the assemblage too. When you install mods, join a Discord server, level a specific character class, participate in a raiding guild, you're not standing outside the assemblage observing it. You are being configured by it. Your experience of the game world, your data, your relationship to your informants, the things you can see and the things you can't, all of these are shaped by where you sit in the assemblage. This is not a methodological problem to be solved. It's a methodological fact to be acknowledged and then worked with. Rachel Berryman and Crystal Abaddon's chapter in Practicing Digital Ethnography is the most recent extended methodological statement on virtual worlds ethnography, and is written from the vantage point of 2026, which means it's written in and for the present moment that you're actually doing fieldwork in. Their starting point is a set of 3 shifts in how virtual worlds are now understood and used, compared to the period when Nardi, Golub and Bjolstorff were doing their foundational work. The first shift is from what they call fantasy socialization to pragmatic interaction. The early discourse around virtual worlds, roughly 2000 to 2015, centred on games as spaces for entertainment and leisure. World of Warcraft, EverQuest, Second Life, places where people went to escape the everyday and inhabit something different. The dominant corporate discourse of virtual worlds in the mid-2020s is different. Virtual worlds are now marketed first and foremost as tools for productivity and communication, as solutions to the logistical problem of distributed work and learning created and accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic. Platforms like Gather.town describe themselves as virtual headquarters for remote teams, offering water cooler chats and productive conversations in a space where spatial proximity can stand in for physical co-presence. This is a fundamentally different social imaginary from the one Nardi inhabited. The virtual world is no longer an escape from work, it is the medium of work. The second shift is between Berryman and Abaddon, called distributive exclusivity and discursive inclusivity. Meta's metaverse is the obvious example. On the one hand, accessing it fully requires purchasing specific hardware, Meta's Quest headsets, that remain expensive and limited in its reach. On the other hand, Meta's marketing language insists, constantly and emphatically, that the metaverse isn't just for gamers or developers, it will be for everyone. The discourse of openness and participation is deployed to mask a structure of access that remains highly uneven. This tension between the rhetoric of universal participation and the reality of differential access is familiar from the history of every other major communications technology, but its specific instantiation in the metaverse is new enough to require ethnographic attention in its own right. The third shift is from what Berryman and Abaddon call spectator sport to spectator spot. The transformation of virtual worlds from competitive gaming arenas with audiences into hosting platforms for events, concerts and branded experiences. Their primary examples are the K-pop and gaming collaborations, in particular the 2018 League of Legends World Championship, at which K-pop groups performed live. K-pop idol characters were integrated into the game's roster, and the event became simultaneously a gaming competition, a concert, and a promotional vehicle for downloadable in-game cosmetics. The The virtual world in this context is not primarily a place you inhabit. It's a venue you pass through, a spectator spot where the event is the point, not the game. The methodological implications for these three shifts are significant. The field has changed since Nardi and Golub wrote. The virtual worlds you're studying in 2026 are not the same kinds of things they were studying in 2010. The communities are different. The commercial contexts are different. The meanings attached to participation are different. The tools and the expectations about what the tools are for are different. This doesn't make the older literature irrelevant. Nardi's methodological insights remain good. Golub's critique of sensorial immersion remains sharp. But the specific context you're operating in requires you to read those texts as historical documents as well as methodological guides. Harish Gautam's EVE Online case study in the same volume is the freshest piece of fieldwork in this week's readings, and I want to use it as a model for the kind of thinking you'll need to do when you sit down to write your final papers. The piece opens with an account of Gautam's ship being destroyed. He's passing through a jump gate in Alliance space that is in theory under the control of his coalition. But when he's caught in a bubble trap set by a small group of bandits, his ship disintegrates. His cargo, worth tens of millions of ISK, goes with it. The local chat fills with ASCII art and insults. His cloned body drifts away as a frozen husk into the black. This is an excellent opening for ethnographic writing because it does something that's harder than it looks. It puts the reader inside an experience that is from the outside entirely opaque. What is a bubble trap? What is ISK? What is a jump gate? While making the emotional and social reality of the experience completely legible. You don't need to understand the mechanics to understand what Gautam has been, that he's been ambushed, humiliated, and robbed. The scene communicates its social meaning without requiring prior knowledge of the game world. That is what good ethnographic writing does. It is your model. The analytic heart of Gautam's piece is what he discovers about Eve's relationship to the work-play distinction, which, as you'll remember, has been a thread running through the whole course. EVE Online is a game in which ISK, the in-game currency, is generated through activities that are in many respects indistinguishable from work. Mining asteroids for hours, running market arbitrage, managing manufacturing supply chains. One of his informants, a self-described market PvP player, compares his EVE activity directly to his past as an equities trader. Another describes the essential tool of successful resource extraction as basically just spreadsheets. The vocabulary of EVE, streams of income, contracts with courier clauses, diversified portfolios, is the vocabulary of finance, not a fantasy adventure. And yet for the players who live within EVE, this is play. Not despite its similarity to work, but in some way alongside or through it. Gautam cites a definition of play that is useful here. Play resists compulsion. The player gains from the mere act of playing, which in itself is the reward sought. The EVE player who runs market arbitrage for 6 hours is not compelled to, they choose to, and that choice, the voluntary self-motivated engagement, with an activity that is absorbing precisely because it's optional, is what makes it play, regardless of how much it resembles labour. But what Gautam's fieldwork really turns on is his discovery that the conceptual categories he brought into the field don't hold up. The distinction between online and offline, which sounds simple enough, is not binary in EVE. In the course of his fieldwork, Gautam encounters multiple distinct states of presence. Offline but in-game, meaning the character is logged in and running automated activities, sometimes pejoratively called botting, but the player is not at the keyboard. Online but not in EVE. The player is active on voice comms, participating in fleet coordination, but is not logged into the game itself. And partially online. The player is logged into EVE but docked, not flying, present in the game world in some sense, but not engaged in active play. These distinctions matter enormously for how the game is played. A player who is offline during extraction, who is logged off the game during a fleet operation, puts the Reliance at a disadvantage, Their ship cannot be moved. It can be abandoned or left stranded in enemy territory. The decision of whether to wait for them or continue without them is a real military and social decision, with real consequences for the operation and for the social relationships within the group. Gautam's conclusion is methodological, and it's one that we can sit with for a moment. He argues that the categories online, offline, and virtual actual, as they appear in much digital ethnography, are not emergent from the fieldwork. They're inscribed by researchers, brought in from outside and imposed on data that doesn't naturally conform to them. If you go into a virtual world already knowing that online and offline are the relevant distinction, you'll see data that confirms it, because you've organised your attention to find it. But if you stay close to what your informants are actually doing, if you follow the distinctions they are making, you find a much more heterogeneous and interesting picture of presence, attention, and social engagement. This is a version of a principle that runs through the whole history of anthropology. Don't import your categories from outside and then confirm them by finding them in the field. Arrive with genuine curiosity about the distinctions your informants are drawing, the worlds they use for the relevant states of their social world, the problems they're actually trying to solve. The categories will follow from the fieldwork, not precede it. So let me try to synthesize what the 3 readings this week are telling you about your object of study. Taylor tells you you're not studying the game, you're studying the assemblage. Everything that makes the game what it is, the software, the mods, the bodies, the communities, the companies, the legal structures, the cultural frameworks, including yourself since you're inside it too. Methodologically follow the interrelations, not the objects in isolation. Berryman and Abaddon tell you that the virtual worlds you're studying exist in specific historical moment that shapes what they are and what they mean. The discourse around your game, the corporate context it exists within, the overlapping communities of practice that have formed around it. These are not background noise. They are part of the assemblage. Methodologically, that means don't treat the game as if it exists outside of history. Gautam tells you that the categories you bring into the field will shape what you find, and that the most productive ethnographic work happens when you allow your informants to destabilize those categories. The online-offline distinction collapsed in Eve. What other distinctions might collapse in your field site? What are your informants doing that doesn't fit the vocabulary you arrived with? Methodologically, stay close to the distinctions your informants are making. Let the categories emerge from the field. Together, these 3 methodological orientations, follow the assemblage, situate historically, let categories emerge, constitute the analytical posture you need for the kind of fieldwork this course has been asking you to do. So, your final papers will be ethnographic accounts of something that happened in your game world. This raises a problem that's been lurking throughout the module, and I want to name it explicitly here. How do you convey to a reader who may not play your game, who may never have entered a virtual world, what it's like to be there? Nardi tried. She used a day in the life structure, the 6 AM login, the 5:30 PM raid, the lurker fight. She was honest that the visual allure, the sense of discovery and serendipity that imbue World of Warcraft play cannot be captured in descriptive prose. She tried anyway, and the result is some of the best ethnographic writing that I could think to put in the course about it. Golub tried by turning the analytical apparatus onto the experience of raiding itself, showing you, through the framework of project and commitment, why people care about something that from the outside looks like clicking monsters. And Gautam's opening, the ship destruction, the ASCII art in the chat window, the frozen husk of his clone body drifting into the black, does something that all 3 of them are reaching toward. It makes the experience of being in the game legible, emotionally and socially, without requiring the reader to understand the mechanics first. This is your challenge. What happened to you in your game world this week? Not what mechanics you engaged with, not what content you completed, but what happened. What was the moment that surprised you, that changed your understanding of this community, that revealed something you hadn't seen before? That is the event your paper should be built around. And the skill that separates good ethnographic writing from a game review or a player diary is the ability to take that event, the wipe, the drama, the moment of unexpected generosity, the election of a new guild member, the discovery of a community norm you'd violated without knowing it, and make it into a text that reveals something about the social world it came from. Geertz called it thick description. The cockfight was not described as a sporting event with a cultural background. It was presented as a cultural text, readable, layered, dense with the meanings that the Balinese were putting into it. Your game world is your cockfight. Your job is to read it. So keep playing, keep writing, and keep asking, what is this community saying about itself through the game it plays?